My name is Rhonda Walker, and I was 34 years old when my boss told me I was replaceable by Friday. At the time, I was working as the procurement manager at a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. Nothing flashy, no Silicon Valley jargon, just a solid operation that made industrial components for automotive suppliers the kind of place where things were actually built, not just discussed in endless meetings. We employed around 300 people across 2 facilities, and our annual revenue hovered near $80 million. Respectable, stable, or so I thought. Procurement doesn't sound glamorous. Most people hear the word and imagine someone clicking order on a screen. That couldn't be further from reality. My job was the bloodstream of the company. Every raw material, every component, every machine part, every box bolt and bearing passed through my hands in some way. If it was bought, I was responsible. I managed relationships with 47 suppliers across 12 states and 3 countries. Each one had different lead times, pricing structures, quality thresholds, and personalities. Some were massive corporations where everything required 3 approvals and a ticket number. Others were family-run businesses where trust mattered more than contracts. My real job wasn't purchasing, it was knowing people. Knowing who would pick up the phone at 7 p.m. on a Saturday. Knowing who would quietly extend payment terms when cash flow tightened, knowing who would prioritize us during shortages and who would abandon us the second a bigger client called. I'd been there 6 years, started as a junior buyer right out of college and worked my way up, made mistakes early on, costly ones. Once I missed a delivery deadline that shut down our assembly line for half a day and nearly got me fired. That mistake cost the company $50,000 and it taught me everything. I built buffers, backup suppliers, contingency plans. By year 4, the system was humming. Costs were down 22% from when I started. Lead times improved. Quality complaints dropped. I'd renegotiated major contracts and saved the company over $2 million in a single year. The CEO loved me because I made the numbers look good. Operations loved me because parts arrived when they should. Even accounting tolerated me, which says a lot. None of what made me effective existed in a manual. I had a tracking system only. I understood a messy combination of spreadsheets, notes, and institutional memory. I knew which supplier's Indiana plant produced cleaner aluminum than their Kentucky facility. I knew which account manager's daughter was applying to college, and which one was weeks away from retirement and just wanted peace. That knowledge lived in my head. It couldn't be transferred in 2 weeks or 2 months. Outside of work, my boyfriend, Daniel Reeves, was the only one who saw how much pressure I carried. He worked in civil engineering, different world, same long hours. At night, over takeout and half-finished conversations, I'd unload the small frustrations I never voiced at the office. He listened, never tried to fix it, just reminded me I wasn't invisible even when work treated me like I was. Everything changed the day Gerald Patterson walked in. Mid-50s. Expensive suits that didn't belong on a factory floor. MBA. 20-plus years of experience. From the first meeting he had, that looked like he needed to prove he was the smartest person in every room. He corrected people over irrelevant details, sent emails at midnight just to be seen, requested reports no one had ever needed before. I told myself to be patient. I'd handled difficult leadership before. I had no idea how wrong I was. Gerald didn't ease into leadership. He crashed into it. Within his first week, he requested daily reports from every department head, not summaries, details. He wanted to know who spoke to which vendor, what was said, what tone was used, and whether follow-up emails had been sent within a reasonable time frame, which he never actually defined. Procurement, of course, was hit hardest. According to Gerald, if money was leaving the company, he needed to see every finger that touched it. At first, I complied. I forwarded emails. I added him to calls. I built spreadsheets no one had ever asked for inventory turnover ratios, broken down by supplier aging reports, updated twice a week projections that assumed nothing ever went wrong. I told myself this was temporary, that once he realized I had the system under control, he'd back off. He didn't. Instead, he started questioning everything. Why did we source aluminum from Reynolds Industrial instead of a cheaper overseas option? Why hadn't I squeezed another 3% out of a contract already at industry floor pricing? Why did I allow certain suppliers flexibility on lead times? Each question came with the same undertone. You're not thinking hard enough. I could do this better. The worst part wasn't the criticism. It was his complete misunderstanding of how procurement actually worked. Gerald treated every negotiation like a battlefield. Someone had to lose, preferably the supplier. He believed vendors were interchangeable, that loyalty was a weakness, that relationships were a liability. I tried explaining it to him once. Strong supplier relationships give us priority during shortages, I said carefully during one meeting. They give us flexibility when things go wrong. They're insurance. He smiled at me the way people smile at children who say something naive. Business is business, Rhonda, he said. Our job is to maximize value. Sentiment doesn't belong in contracts. 2 months into his tenure, he started sitting in on my supplier calls without warning. The first was with Reynolds Industrial, our primary aluminum supplier. James, their account manager, and I had worked together for 4 years. Our calls were usually straightforward: order volumes, delivery schedules, occasional industry gossip. That day, Gerald joined the call unannounced. Within 5 minutes, he turned it into an interrogation. He demanded cost breakdowns, questioned their margins, asked why they couldn't reduce lead times without increased pricing. James stayed professional, but I could hear the tension tightening his voice. When the call ended, James rang me back immediately. "What was that about?" he asked. "New VP," I said. "He's still getting familiar with things." There was a pause. "Next time, give me a heads up before you bring someone like that into a call. That was uncomfortable." I apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again. I was wrong. By the 4th month, Gerald questioned my decisions publicly, in meetings, in emails copied to executives. He rewrote supplier emails I'd already sent, making them more aggressive, stripping out nuance. Once he forwarded one of my negotiation summaries back to me with a single line: "Why didn't you push harder?" Daniel noticed the change before I did. "You're quieter lately," he said one night while we were making dinner. "Like you're bracing for something." "I'm just tired," I said, which was true, but incomplete. What I didn't say was that every day at work felt like standing on a fault line, that the ground under me, 6 years of credibility trust results, was shifting because one man thought experience could be replaced with bravado. The review meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. I walked in prepared. Metrics printed, comparisons highlighted, savings calculated. I wasn't asking for praise. I was asking for fairness. Gerald sat across from me with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. And before he said a word, I knew. Gerald slid the performance review across the table like he was handing me a restaurant menu. I picked it up, already scanning for the numbers that mattered. Cost savings, on-time delivery, quality metrics. Every measurable category was there. Every one of them showed improvement. Significant improvement. Then I noticed the ratings. Meets expectations. Not exceeds, not exceptional, just meets. I looked up slowly. I'm confused. Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, waiting. "My performance this year was well above baseline," I said evenly. "We had record cost savings, 96% on-time delivery. Quality issues are down to almost zero." "How is that simply meeting expectations?" He didn't hesitate. "Those results are what we expect from someone in your role." The words landed heavier than he probably intended. "I saved the company over $2 million this year alone," I said. "That's more than 4 times my compensation." He shrugged. "Cost reductions are built into the budget. You're hitting targets." Targets I had created, benchmarks that hadn't existed before I set them. I turned a page. The Reynolds contract renegotiation wasn't budgeted. That saved over $300,000 annually while improving terms. "Any competent procurement manager should be doing that," he said dismissively. "That's the job." The room felt smaller. "I've researched comparable roles," I continued. "Market rate for this position is $15,000 to $20,000 higher than my current salary." Gerald smiled wider. "Online surveys can be misleading. When you factor in stability benefits, work-life balance, you're doing quite well." "I'm not talking about surveys," I said. "I've spoken directly with recruiters." That was when he leaned forward. "You're welcome to explore other opportunities," he said lightly. "But in my experience, people who threaten to leave rarely follow through. And if you did quit, I'd have you replaced by Friday. Procurement isn't exactly rocket science." There it was. The smirk, the certainty, the assumption that I was bluffing. I sat there for a full 10 seconds, letting the moment settle. Then I nodded. "Good to know." He picked up his pen. "Glad we're aligned. Now I need the Reynolds renewal finalized by end of week." I walked back to my office in silence. That afternoon, Daniel texted me. "Dinner tonight." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. "Yes," I replied. "I think I'm ready to leave." "Not the office." "Something bigger." I didn't quit that day. I didn't storm into HR or fire off emotional emails or update my LinkedIn with a dramatic announcement. I did what I'd always done best. I planned. That night, Daniel listened while I laid everything out. The review, the dismissal, the smirk. He didn't interrupt once. "They don't deserve you," he said finally. "I know," I replied, "but I need to leave clean." The next morning, I reached out to a recruiter I'd spoken with months earlier. Her name was Ann Morrison, and she specialized in supply chain leadership roles. I kept the message short, exploring options, discreetly. She called me that evening. "Rhonda," she said, laughing softly, "I have 3 companies that would fight over you." By Wednesday, I had 2 interviews lined up. By Thursday morning, I was on a video call with Linda Perez, a procurement director with 20 years of experience and none of Gerald's ego. She understood the work, the nuance, the pressure. She offered me the job before the call ended. 95,000 base, quarterly bonuses, real autonomy. "I'll need to give 2 weeks' notice," I said. "Take whatever time you need," Linda replied. "We want you here long term." On Friday afternoon, I printed my resignation letter and walked into Gerald's office. "I'm resigning," I said. 2 weeks' notice." He scanned the page, then smiled. "We don't need 2 weeks. Clear your desk today." "Perfect." I packed my things, said goodbye to my assistants. Katie looked like she might cry. Ben asked if we were hiring. I gave him Linda's contact. HR processed my exit immediately. No transition, no documentation. As I walked to my car box in hand, I felt lighter than I had in months. Behind me, Gerald thought he'd won. My first week at the new company felt unreal in the best way. No midnight emails, no micromanagement disguised as oversight. Linda trusted me, asked smart questions, let me do my job. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing myself every time my phone buzzed. I didn't think about my old company at all until Tuesday afternoon when an unfamiliar local number popped up on my screen. "Rhonda, it's James, from Reynolds Industrial." My stomach tightened instantly. "Hey James, what's going on?" There was an awkward pause. "I got an email yesterday from your company," from Gerald. I didn't interrupt. He demanded a 15% price cut and shorter lead times. No conversation, no context, just demands. Then he said if we couldn't comply, he'd find another supplier. I closed my eyes. "I don't work there anymore," I said quietly. "I left last week." Silence. "Then that explains a lot." James sighed. "We can't meet those terms. Our margins are already tight. If that's how they're going to handle this, we're pulling out." Reynolds supplied nearly 40% of their raw materials. "That's your call," I said carefully. "For what it's worth, I appreciated working with you." "If you ever need aluminum at your new place," he replied, "you call me. I'll take care of you." By Friday, I'd received 7 more calls. Steel, plastics, packaging, every single one with the same story. Aggressive emails, threats, no understanding of relationships that had taken years to build. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't interfere. I simply told the truth. Then HR called. Rachel sounded tense. "Off the record, did you sabotage supplier relationships before you left?" "No," I said calmly. Gerald accepted my resignation, effective immediately. I didn't even work my notice. She exhaled. "That's what I thought. Because everything is falling apart. Operations was panicking. Legal was getting involved. Contracts were collapsing." I hung up the phone and stared out the window of my new office. I hadn't touched a single domino. I'd just stepped aside. By the following Monday, the chaos could no longer be contained. I didn't hear it through gossip or social media. I heard it through the people who had once kept that company alive. One supplier after another reached out not to complain, but to confirm what they already knew. Gerald wasn't negotiating. He was issuing ultimatums. He sent emails like a man who believed leverage existed simply because he said it did. 15% price cuts, faster lead times, no discussion of capacity constraints, no acknowledgement of existing agreements, just threats dressed up as corporate confidence. If they couldn't comply, he'd source alternatives. Suppliers don't panic when you say that. They take notes. Within 2 weeks, production schedules started slipping, then stopping. Assembly lines went idle, waiting for materials that weren't coming. Emergency sourcing kicked in, and every rushed replacement cost double what the original contracts had secured. Legal got pulled in when cancellation notices arrived citing penalty clauses Gerald hadn't bothered to read. Rachel called me again, voice low, exhausted. "It's bad," she said. "Really bad. The CEO is furious. Operations can't meet next month's commitments. Finance is hemorrhaging cash." "Is Gerald still running procurement?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "and he's spiraling." Apparently, he'd tried to manage everything himself while searching for a replacement. He sat in on every call, rewrote every email, burned bridges faster than anyone could repair them. When things didn't immediately improve, he blamed the suppliers, then the market, then me. He sent a company-wide email accusing me of sabotaging relationships before I left. Linda forwarded it to me with a short note, "Want legal to step in." I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. No, let him keep talking. Because the truth was simple, and truth doesn't require defense. By the end of the week, legal had been dragged fully into the mess. Emergency contracts were being signed at inflated prices. Customers started canceling orders when deadlines slipped. Missed shipments triggered penalty clauses on the other side, too. Every decision Gerald made compounded the damage. Rachel called one last time that Friday. "They're talking about bringing you back," she said. "Offering whatever it takes." I leaned back in my chair, calm, grounded. "I'm not interested." She didn't argue. "Document everything," I added gently. "This isn't over." When the call ended, I returned to my work. New suppliers, new systems, new trust being built slowly, deliberately, the right way. Behind me, an entire operation was grinding to a halt. Not because I left, but because someone finally learned that knowing how to order things is not the same as knowing who makes them move. The email went out on a Wednesday morning. I didn't hear about it from Rachel. I didn't hear it through former coworkers whispering in my inbox. I saw it because Linda forwarded it to me with no commentary at all, just the subject line and a single line highlighted in the middle of the message. "Gerald Patterson is no longer with the company. Effective immediately." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the damage. Just a clean corporate sentence trying to cauterize a wound that had already bled out. Later that afternoon, Rachel called. "They fired him," she said, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "No severance, no transition." Security walked him out. I closed my eyes, not in satisfaction, but in recognition. This was always how it would end. "The board investigated," she continued. "Turns out his resume was generous. The company in Ohio. It didn't just collapse after he left. His vendor decisions were part of why it failed. Same playbook, different victims." He tried to negotiate a severance package, Rachel added. Threatened legal action. And I asked. The morality clause voided it. Gross negligence. Silence stretched between us. "They're bleeding talent," she said quietly. "People are scared. Procurement is chaos. Operations is in survival mode." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not for Gerald, for the people who'd warned him, who'd trusted him, who now had to clean up after him. After the call messages started coming in, former colleagues, engineers, planners, buyers, all telling the same story from different angles. Missed shipments, idle lines, emergency contracts signed in panic, customers quietly moving their business elsewhere. One message stood out, from a woman I'd worked with years ago. He thought confidence could replace competence. She was right. Gerald hadn't failed because he was inexperienced. He'd failed because he was incurious. He believed authority made him right, that relationships were replaceable, that people were interchangeable. At my new job, things moved steadily forward. Linda brought me into strategic meetings, listened, asked questions, trusted my judgment. I hired thoughtfully, built slowly, the way real systems are built. One afternoon, while reviewing a supplier onboarding plan, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not relieved, not triumphant, just done. Sometimes people don't need revenge. They need exactly what they ask for. 3 months after Gerald was escorted out of the building, my phone buzzed with an email I didn't expect, but wasn't surprised by either. It was from the CEO of my old company. The tone was careful, professional, apologetic in the way corporate apologies usually are, acknowledging missteps, leadership failures, and lessons learned without ever naming the damage in human terms. He wrote that my departure had been mishandled, that the company had underestimated the complexity of my role, that they were eager to make things right. Then came the offer. $110,000 base salary, profit sharing, a signing bonus to cover what I'd lost in unvested benefits, a guaranteed seat in management meetings, authority over procurement strategy, everything I'd asked for before Gerald ever arrived. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Linda with the subject line, "FYI, not taking this." She replied almost immediately, "Good. We like having you here." I wrote back to the CEO politely, thanked him for the offer, told him I was happy in my current role and not looking to make a change, wished him and the company well. He responded within the hour. Would I at least consider consulting helping rebuild supplier relationships? He'd pay whatever rate I named. I stared at the screen for maybe 30 seconds. Then I typed my reply. I declined. Recommended a few former suppliers by name. Suggested that if the new procurement manager approached them with respect instead of demands, they might be willing to talk. Wished him luck. I never heard back. Life moved forward the way it usually does when you stop fighting it. I settled into my role, built new relationships, implemented ideas I'd never been allowed to try before. 8 months later, I was promoted. My old company limped along. Revenue dropped. Market share eroded. Several longtime customers never returned after the supply chain chaos. Layoffs followed. Eventually, they started talking about selling. 6 months after I left, Katie reached out. She'd taken my advice and applied to Linda's team. She got the job. We had lunch during her first week. "It's so different here," she said. "People actually listen." Ben left not long after. Better pay, better hours, a clean break. The last I heard, my old company had hired and lost 2 procurement managers in under a year. Too much damage, too little trust. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight. It's to walk away and let the truth do the rest.